G'day so-and-sos and welcome to my sewing room. My name is Kathy and today I'm going to be teaching you how to thread and clean your Singer sewing machine. Now I have the Singer Cosplay and the Cosplay is pretty much the same machine as the Singer Heavy Duty. They just have a different outer casing and they'll market it a little bit different. But I'm also going to teach you some tips on how to thread it correctly so that you have less jams and you have more consistent stitching. Okay, let's get cracking. Here we have my Singer Cosplay. Now, like I said, the Cosplay is the same machine as the Singer Heavy Duty. They were just marketed a little bit differently. This one has a cute decals and is red and white and nice and bright and everything. It was marketed towards costume makers, hence the Cosplay, but it's the same machine as the Singer Heavy Duty. So what we're going to do is pull this plate off, take the bobbin out, the bobbin casing, give it a clean and give it an oil. Then I'm going to show you how to load up a fresh bobbin, and then we're going to rethread the machine, and along the way I'm going to teach you how to rethread it correctly so that you don't get jams and you don't put your tension out of whack. It's really important that you do learn these things rather than just following along, because if you don't do it correctly then you're going to end up getting frustrated with your machine and you're not going to be able to figure out why. Now the first thing we're going to do is to take this plate off. We've already taken our bobbin out. So our bobbin was sitting in like this. We've taken our bobbin out. We're going to take this plate off. Now when you get your machine, inside this cover here, you'll have some little tools. And one of them will be this handy little screwdriver. You want to undo these screws. You'll notice too that my machine is off, even though like having the light on there would be handy. I've seen some tutorials where people do machine cleaning or threading or whatever, and they say usually you should have the light off, but I'm going to leave it on while I show you. The reason you leave it off is that so you don't accidentally press the presser foot and you don't put a needle through your hand. So you just don't do it. So secondly, we're going to take this black bit out. Now, I used to be really good and there's a knack. I used to be able to twist it and take it out, but it's been a while since I've fussed with this machine. So I need to undo these screws just a little bit to be able to loosen that little plate that holds it in place, to be able to get that out. Now, from memory, I shouldn't need to. Yeah. So then we've got that bobbin casing out. Another little tool that you will have in that little box is this brush. So you want to give him, he's not too bad really. I must have cleaned it before I put it in storage, which is very disciplined of me. Very good habit. Give that a bit of a clean. Now secondly, you want to get in here and give that a good dust out. So I've actually got it pretty clean, which is good. But you can get tweezers. You'll find that if you're using a lot of cotton fabric or anything sort of linty, or if you're using cheap thread, you'll end up with a lot of lint and stuff down here. So I generally do this once a week if I'm using this machine regularly. And I will just take the bobbin out and give just the inside of this one a good clean sort of every time I change that bobbin. So I've given that a bit of a dust. Now what you want to do is give your machine some oil. So if you have a look in here, see that little hole there? That's where your oil goes. And if you look, you can actually see I've actually got some oil in there still. So I must have really looked after this machine before I put it away into storage. So all you want to do is just get your oil and give it 1 or 2 drops. And that's all you need to do. Then when you put this back in, you'll see here, this little bit here, that knobby bit. That knobby bit needs to press up against that bit. when you put it back in. That's when you know that you've got it in correctly. So if you have a look, see how it presses up against that? That's when you know it's in right. And then you tighten everything back up and put your plate back on and tighten that. I'm just going to have to move that camera back a little bit so that I can get my hands in there without blocking the camera and getting in your way. Now you don't want to tighten everything up too much, because remember, you're going to have to undo it again in a week when you give that a clean. Okay, and my plate, and the door just goes back on. What I could have done is just drop that foot too. So if you have a look at that button there, that will drop that foot and get that out of the way. Just one less thing in your way as you do this. Okay, we'll get those screws back in. I'm going to tighten that back up, and then I'll be back and show you how to thread your machine. Okay, we're ready to wind our bobbin with our thread. But the first thing I'm going to do, I want to talk to you about, is thread. Now, not all threads are created equal. This thread here is from Spotlight, which is the equivalent would be Joann's in the States. So it's our sort of local fabric shop. So if you have a look at the top of that spool, you can see all those tiny little fluffy threads. Now this stuff is just a couple of dollars per spool, and it goes on sale for 10 spools for $10. And when I was a beginner sewer, I went nuts when I saw that sale, and I bought a spool in every single color. I bought a heap of bobbins and I loaded up every bobbin. So now I've got a heap of bobbins that I won't use and thread that I won't use too much. I'll use it today, but it's not ideal. I mean, it does the job, but what it'll do is leave all those little bits of fiber in your machine so that you're cleaning out your machine more often, and your machine will get jammed up a little bit more often as well. Compare that to Gutermann thread. So this is what I use. Now you can even see just by how shiny that is not cotton, it's polyester, and which is better for thread. And see how if we look on the top of that, there's no fluffy little bits. So this is a little bit more expensive. I buy it from Vardman Thread online in Australia. So it's a little bit more expensive, but it does seem to last longer because it's not breaking all the time like the cheap stuff. It's not jamming up my machine. It looks beautiful top stitching. So this one is an all-purpose one, but the top stitching one is a little bit thicker, maybe a little bit heavier weight. So keep that in mind when you're buying thread. Yes, you can buy the cheaper stuff, but cheap come out cheap. Now I'm just going to set up this camera again and I'll be back. Okay, so we've got our spool on the little spindle holder up there. So this is our bobbin thingy. Not even sure what to call that. So you see I go down around the front of it, make sure it's clicked in, and around the back, making sure it's in there. So you can see by the arrow there. Now when I thread it into my bobbin, make sure you're using the correct bobbin for your machine. Okay, again, not all bobbins are created equal. You have to use the one that's made for your machine. And it goes over onto that holder. And now to make it go into bobbin mode, we click it over. From there, we press down on our foot pedal. We turn our machine on. See, I was being good and didn't have my machine on. And it winds up. And then we click it back over. Make sure you click it back over, otherwise it'll stay in bobbin mode. And that is how we load our bobbin. Now you need to make sure that your bobbin is in the correct way, or it just won't work. So you can see that the direction that I have that cotton going, that thread going. So I want it in a P for Peter direction. Now, the way that I remember that is that the man that comes to service my machines, his name is Peter. So I always remember P for Peter. Some machines will have it around the other way as a Q. So always check your machine's manual or find a good tutorial. So I want to drop that in. Now, you'll be able to see that bit there, that cotton will slide underneath. And make sure that it's underneath there, and then your bobbin is set to go. Now we're going to thread up our machine. Now this machine is pretty good because we're numbered as we go. We've got 1, 2, 3, but there's still some tips and tricks and things that you want to make sure you're doing along the way. So the first thing you want to do is to make sure that your presser foot is up and your machine is off. So if you do it with the presser foot down, you'll end up with your tension too tight and your machine will not be happy. So we're going to go around that number 1 and then in behind number 2. Now you can see that I have that little disc there. You want to make sure that your thread is behind that. And then you're coming down 3, around 4, and then up to 5, which is your hook. Now with your hook, on some machines, the casing is different and your hook might be sticking out here. You don't want to be threading your hook here. You want to make sure it is in the highest position every time. To do that, you always want to be winding your wheel forwards towards you. If you start winding your wheel back, that's when your tension will get messed up. Your machine won't like it, and then when you start sewing, you could jam up. Even if you don't jam up, when you're doing that, it's just putting everything out of whack. So think about if you're driving down the street in your car in second gear and all of a sudden you throw it in reverse. Your gears and mechanics and everything aren't going to like it. If you do get jammed up, or if you get a nest in your bobbin or your fabric gets stuck, you can wind it back a little bit and back and forth and wiggle it to get that jam undone. But as a general rule, you always want to be winding that bad boy forwards and forwards only. So once you have that hook in the up position, then you want to take your thread through that one. You might have seen that, like even just threading this, I have a bit of fluff on the end of that cotton. So I'm going to have to snip it before I try and get it through that needle. But you know, I was the one that decided to use this cotton, even though I said it was no good, didn't I? So who have I got to blame? Me. Only yourself. And then through that needle. Now this machine does have an automatic needle threader. I'm not a fan. By all means, go ahead and practice and see how you go. But for me, I just didn't like it. And it's going to be too hard to thread one-handed, so I'll be back. Winding my wheel forward, I'm going to hold this thread so that it doesn't pull up and out of my needle on me. Winding that flywheel forward, I'm going to let it pick up that bobbin thread. Use my little purple thing, so handy, and pull those through. Now I can put my casing back on. Okay, now if the sewing gods are on my side, that should all be good. And we can sew. Now, I'm always going to start with my needle in my work. Okay, it's just one of those things, another thing that will help stop those jams and just your machine not being happy, because sewing machines are the most temperamental creatures on the face of the planet. I'm going to hold my threads, couple of stitches forward, couple of stitches backwards, always back stitch, it helps to lock in your work, and then off we go, and then back, Now let's have a look at that and see how we went. Oh, that wheel is squeaky. Might have to give that some oil as well. And we'll have a look at our threads and see how we did. Pretty good. So see how they're nice, even. Our tension is good. So we did a pretty good job with that. If you have any questions, leave them below in the comments and I will do my best to get back to you. I'll just note that my tension is on 3. If you have a problem with your machine, the tension is the last thing that you want to mess with. Okay, if people say on Facebook pages and everything like that, oh, I rethreaded my machine 100 times and it still won't work. Well, it's not working because you probably rethreaded it incorrectly 100 times. It's usually a threading problem or a needle problem. All right, so the last thing you want to mess with if your tension, if all else fails, then start messing with your tension. Stitch length generally on a 3. If you're top stitching or basting, you want it on about a 4. Apart from that, any questions, let me know. I hope that you enjoyed my little tutorial, and remember people, it is only fabric. Have a great day. Bye.